To the Wilbraham Regional School District School Committee meeting. It is 6:30 p.m. I see that Wilbraham Public Access Channel is recording. Is there anyone else here recording this meeting? We will begin with doing roll call in alphabetical order. Cheryl Caruana. Here. Tim Collins.
Present.
Sean Kennedy.
Here.
Lisa Murray.
Here.
Britt Tredefer. Mike Cherabassi.
Here.
Michelle Boudreau. Here. If you please stand. Michael, lead us in the pledge of allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we do not have any student representatives this evening, so we will begin with the superintendent's update.
Thank you very much. Our first order of business is recognizing excellence in art and literacy magazine. You have a copy of that award-winning magazine at your stations. I'm going to invite Principal Hale to come up and talk about this distinction that our student publication earned this year.
Good evening. So do you have the, I'm sorry, yeah, okay, great. So that was last year's magazine that they're currently working on this year's magazine. The literary magazine is produced annually. It's a collection of student essays, poems, different projects that they've made in classes, as well as representations of artwork that they've done in their various classes. The National Councils of Teachers of English has this contest every year where schools submit their literary magazines, and this year's, the magazine you're holding was rated superior level by the NCTE. So we're very proud of our two advisors. We have Tessa Chambers, who is a visual arts teacher, and Julia Matero, who is an English teacher, and they work with the students and with the other teachers to highlight things that they're seeing in class that they think are worthy to be in the magazine, and then they work with the kids to refine them and submit them publicly. Yes, they deserve a big round. None of my artwork or writing would be eligible to be in that magazine. So I'm very, very happy for our kids.
This visually looks very stunning.
They do a nice job. They really do. What's that? That is your copy. I purchased them for all of you. But it's under $50, so you don't have to claim it with the ethics board.
Okay, thank you very much, Principal Hale. Before you return to your seat, why don't you just stay right there, because the next presentation is you and Principal DeRoja. Our strategic plan called for us to calibrate interventions and consequences. We had two major initiatives in this area. One was rethinking discipline, which both middle school and high school were part of, and then CSTAG, which all 6 schools were part of. In fact, we did a second round of CSTAG training today to just make sure that we were able to refresh and expand the pool of district staff who have CSTAG training. So I'll turn it over to you to talk about that.
Okay, thank you for having us. It's nice to be in the air conditioning. So we'll start by talking about the Rethinking Discipline initiative. So we were found, and I think notified in February of 2024, at least my school, I think similarly to Steve, that we were suspending students at a rate for Hispanic and multiracial students. There was a lot of disparity between that subgroup and other students in our school, to the point where we were then required to participate in this initiative. So as part of the process, we had to identify action plan, submit that, update that regularly. We had to look at different aspects of how we conducted ourselves, not just within one subgroup, but across the board, to see how we could do better. And that led to also some grant funding, which I think has helped us to be successful in this area, to the point where Steve was removed in June of 2025, and we were removed in December of 2025. So again, the original numbers, I believe, were based on the 21-22 school years, and they notified us in 24, and by December of 25, we had completed the process and were moved. And just speaking to the middle school, the suspension rates for all students went from 12.4% to 1.6%. So from 78 kids suspended to 10. So that there's reasons we'll talk about across the board for that decline.
Yeah, and on the next slide, you'll be able to see this is connected to the equity walk that John led the district through last week, where you can see the 2022 data and how it has dropped down into 2025. So there's been a significant decline as all schools, not just ours, I've looked at improving school culture, looking at ways to create better relationships with students and families, and ultimately communicate expectations to students more clearly and more directly. So it's been great. If we go to the next slide, that's really some of the strategies that we've used. It's just increasing the family relationships. Very often in high school, right, the family wants you to the student wants the family to drop them off around the corner so they won't be seen with a family. Families sometimes struggle with how much do I get involved at the high school level, because I do want my child to kind of navigate and figure stuff out for themselves. But we've really kind of flipped that script a little bit and getting families involved right away when we've seen signs that a student may need increased support and problem solving with those families. We also increased our positive communication with families. We do we call it March Madness, because March can be a very long month, where we have different activities for the teachers. And we had a positive phone call challenge where all of the teachers in the high school were placed into teams and had to make positive phone calls. Then they reported that out every week, so there was a weekly competition going on. And the English department and the adjustment council team won. But our entire school made 456 positive phone calls in the month of March. So that was really good. And then kind of utilizing, I know John will talk about his summer work, but utilizing some of the summer to bring in some of those families who we might, either because they're coming from the middle school or because the parents have self-identified that a kid might be struggling with the transition, bringing them in during the summertime multiple times to meet with them, talk with them, walk around the building to start that relationship.
I think similarly with us, I think we built time into their week during their common planning time to make positive phone calls. It starts right from the summer prior. Well, actually, it starts the year before, so that we identify families. We attend transition meetings for those families at school and at GM, and then bringing them in. We do large group tours over the summer, but we also do a lot of individual tours with families and with kids. There's several kids with autism spectrum disorder that we would bring in just because we want to show them the routine. We want them to walk calls, and we want to make sure that they're comfortable. And the anxiety, not only from the kid, but from the parents' lens, is huge. So if we can alleviate that, help them be more familiar with the surroundings when they get there, that's definitely something that we try to foster. So I think that was an initial part. We also try to emphasize our 6th grade teachers making welcome phone calls to the families before they leave. Push to the next slide.
John, you have like a student council that would also, maybe in the summer, take on some responsibility of integrating kids.
It's not just student council kids, it's a couple different groups, but they do the tours over the summer. So they come in, they meet with the kids, then they come in June, we'll have both schools at once, and they also run the tours there, so they don't want to hear from me,
No.
taking a tour of the building. The parents might want to, but the kids want to hear from a 7th or an 8th grader about what's it really like, what's it like to eat lunch, what's it like to use your locker, which nobody uses, those types of things. The next step for us was trying to come up with some alternatives to the suspensions that we were using as a discipline. We really kind of expanded with the staff that we have, our counseling staff, which has kind of changed over, but my 2 assistant principals really dove in and tried to enhance our mediation program. We did have Saturday detention, which the high school's had for years. We've never had before, but sometimes the ramification of getting a Saturday detention, they're not missing class time. They also may have to miss a basketball game or something because of what behavior that was exhibited. We try to come up with different alternatives to suspension as part of, we may pull them out of class for a little bit and try to do an educational component. So what we struggle with oftentimes is discriminatory language and things directed at other kids. And so just putting them in a room and saying, don't do it again, isn't the most effective way to get the behavior to change. So there's some readings that we do, some videos that we have them watch, several resources from the Information League that we utilize as well. And then trying to enhance the relationships with our staff. So various kids throughout the building have check-ins in the morning, check-outs at the end of the day. And it's really, I stand outside in the morning and watch every kid come in the building, and I can tell you who's having a bad day, and who's dealing with something. And so I can then radio to counselor and say, hey, can you check in with so-and-so? I think it's just kids are coming in at a 75, and we just want to see what we can do to help them. So that's from our lens, trying to find alternatives to the suspensions.
The school committee also helped support a community service liaison. So both the middle school and the high school can assign community service hours. The family meets with that liaison, and then they monitor and set them up for the community service that's going to be done. We also have started to include athletic and extracurricular consequences as a result, as an alternative to suspension. So if you're going to make poor choices during the school day, you're not going to be able to go out to soccer practice that afternoon or go to the basketball game. So that has also, on top of what John mentioned, been an effective alternative option for us. Kind of going into the educational interventions, Aaron, if you go to the next slide. At the high school, we have brought on an I Decide curriculum, which is from Harvard Medical School. It's a research-based curriculum, and it teaches students about the impact of nicotine, alcohol, THC on the developing brain. We have staff that have been trained by the I Decide creators to deliver that curriculum, and that's often a consequence that's been assigned as a result of anything having to do with alcohol, tobacco, or THC. Also, our Lenny Learning link and our Character Strong curriculum that we use in advisory have been some of the educational interventions that John was mentioning earlier at the middle school.
The additional aspect of training, and this is not just in our building, but the Training Active Bystanders is, I believe, funded by the grant as well. And that allowed for our kids to get trained in how to go in to talk to their peers and some of their younger peers and talk about how to resolve conflict and how to treat each other with kindness and things. So it's kids hearing from other kids. So that, I think, was a huge group. As Cheryl mentioned before, it's those kids that are involved in a lot of different things, but that are connecting with the younger kids. We really kind of enhanced our data team, prioritized social and emotional learning as part of that. So in our schedule, Last year, we created win blocks, which are 3 days a week, 24 minutes a day. But that was an avenue for us to get some social groups, to work on some Character Strong, again, Tier 2, and then the Character Strong Tier 1, which was also grant funded, was something that our climate team did a full year calendar for, with different lessons for different grades, for different topics throughout the year. Proactive planning, let's switch. So we do a little bit of, this is kind of where the CSTAG process comes in a little bit for us, and I know for Steve as well. We do a fair number of what we call stay-away plans. So if we feel there's conflict between kids, or there has been conflict between kids, or we anticipate there will be conflict between kids, we're trying to put some stuff into place that limits the amount of time they spend with each other. That's a hard thing to do based on the schedule and based on the size of the school. I know that's a challenge for Steve as well. But we think it's an important part for kids to live up to the agreements that they've entered into. Part of the CSTAG process is the comprehensive school threat assessment guidelines. It's a team approach. And so if something happens that's threatening in nature, we have a team of people together. And thank you, Doug and John, for setting up the training today. So we went from having 3 people in CSTAG training to 11. That allows for a little more flexibility in who can be a part of that, but it includes teachers, it includes counselors, administrators, our school psychologists, our nurses. So it's a different lens on everything, and how do we support a kid that may be struggling from all different lenses. I think that's a huge part of what we try and do to be a little bit more proactive so that we don't see repetitive behaviors, and cuts down on some of the suspension rates as well. And then one of the last resort types of things, if kids are really struggling, we actually will put kids on a pass restriction or escort them and transport them from class to class or between classes. Not something you want to do, no kid wants that, but in order to keep everybody safe, sometimes that's what we do.
Yeah, we can go on to the next slide because all of those things are happening at the high school as well. So when we talk about the specific support for students, we're working with, as John mentioned, the team, the collaboration with the counselors, the coordination with outside therapeutic services through our connection with Colleen Goodrow and setting those up for students in need, and connecting families with the counseling that is sometimes difficult for them to access. The ability that we've been able to bring BHN right into our schools to deliver counseling services for students and families who can't access it outside of the school. Our partnership with the coalition and the DA's office has been helpful. The DA's office was here today working with our seniors around distracted driving during the spring months of their senior year can sometimes be a challenge from other things going on. And then just our Tier 2 interventions that have worked to make sure kids are feeling heard and that they understand the expectation and how they have the autonomy to make different choices.
Go to the next slide. So professional learning and equity focus. Some of the things that we were able to do over the last couple of years, our teams have recreated some of the behavior matrix, so they're reteaching every year what the expectations are. We actually had our 6th grade where we've seen or saw an uptick in some behaviors we were not comfortable with. They kind of reset and went back to where they started the year. They went over all these things again. They're posted in classrooms and it's visible to kids. Character Strong, we mentioned before, through our advisory program, which our advisory is Monday and Wednesday, and the win blocks are Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We've also been able to, Katie Manuel took part in a training where she presents a program called See in Red, which is, it's really, I think she's done it now 3 or 4 times with different groups throughout the district. And it talks a lot about the racial disparities in the criminal justice system, things like that. And then we did 2 years ago, we brought in a woman from MARC, which is the Massachusetts Aggression Reduction Center. Was Englanders, one of the leaders of that group. And then the last thing we did, which also was great, part of the grant, was we connected with Dr. Gwen Bass. She's a counselor, and her focus is on trauma-informed classrooms. So she came and worked with our entire faculty. She came back and worked in small groups. She went and observed kids. And the final piece to that, after 2 years of working with her, she'll come back in May and spend some rapid time with the faculty. She's fantastic, and she's fairly local. She gets just more like a, when the teachers are sitting there, they don't want the theoretical. They want to say, how can I help this kid? What's a strategy I can use to help solve this kid's problem and the problem this kid we have? So she's great at connecting the dots that maybe we don't see because of our blind spots.
Yeah, when we've done similar professional learning over the course of the last 2 or 3 years, we did a book study on culturally proficient teaching, which is a book written by Zaretta Hammond. The whole entire faculty read and discussed that book over a period of time. We've created our own in-house equity leaders in the school district, in our school, and then, spent a lot of time looking at disaggregated data for a variety of things, so that it's a lens that is more naturally developed and more naturally asked for by the teachers than have been previously. So we go on to the last slide, Aaron. Some of the positive culture and recognition we've already touched upon, but really trying to normalize positive and expected behavior. That's really what has been the focus. Is we've developed a pride pin system. So at graduation, the students wear their cap and gown, and they're allowed to put any pins that they've won over the course of their 4 years. Those could be varsity athletic pins. Those could be, we have an annual awards night where many of the awards come with a pin. This goes back to when you have a Letterman jacket in the 70s or 60s, where you have all the pins on there. It's kind of a tradition that's carried forward, although we don't have the Letterman jackets anymore. Those pins, we tell them to put them in a special place. And graduation, you've seen the kids come with all their different pins. So the pride pin is an opportunity for a teacher to recognize a kid, but it doesn't have to be for something outstanding. It can just be for, I want you to know that you're seen. I appreciate the participation you bring to class each day. We sometimes get caught in a system where we have to recognize for really, really outstanding stuff when we can just recognize for what is normally expected. And that's okay.
I would echo that. In our sort of Eagle approach that we have as a positive reward system, it's really about catching the kids doing something right. And that's, holding the door, saying thank you, some of those things that is expected or we would all expect, but it's maybe not the norm. So some of those things are important to highlight for kids as well. To Steve's point, it doesn't have to be, rescue a cat from the tree. It's not that. It's about doing the right thing on a regular basis. I would also highlight some of the school climate work that includes kids in the idea of the process. We've continued throughout the year, but more recently, this year is doing a monthly theme. And really, they've done a nice job. We've been highlighting, we had a neurodiversity month last month. We had a mental health month this month where it's part of the morning show that we stream. It's morning announcements, it's activities for groups, it's videos that they can watch. So it kind of gets the whole school involved, and they've done a really nice job. So the staff is doing great. I would also say, and I don't want to necessarily end on a down note, but kids are kids, and sometimes kids need to be suspended. And we've got behavioral concerns in both buildings that we need to address. I think we're just being a little more deliberate and thoughtful about how
they're kind of, no, we don't have them anymore, but they're kind of discriminatory in themselves because who have the Letterman jackets? Mostly males. And that's not what we want to celebrate. So yeah, that's not something that we do anymore. We do have the letter, and we've talked about researching like a sweatshirt or a sweater that we could put the letter on as a catch point for kids. But your first time lettering in a varsity sport, you get the letter, and every sport after that, you get a pin for that. But in terms of what is it taking away from? It would be hard for me to say in education today, with all that classroom teachers have to do. I don't know what it's taking away from because it's a lot. It's a lot from first bell to 10 o'clock at night when they're done with grading or lesson planning for the next day. It's a lot. And in terms of, what was his first question?
The Saturday detention?
Oh, yeah, I think, whether you have a sports game or not, that Saturdays is often an opportunity maybe to sleep in late, or maybe an opportunity to play roadblocks or Fortnite for 8 hours with your friends. And so, yes, I would still say it's a deterrent.
Yeah, no adolescent wants to get up at 7:30 in the morning on Saturday. Most teachers don't want to get up at 7:30.
Thank you.
The other piece, Sean, I think is if you look at research and the correlation between suspension and missing class and dropout rates later on, there's a pretty direct relationship there as well.
Yeah, excellent. I do worry, the answers to all questions tend to be putting more responsibility, administration and teachers and the parents. And it's, like you said, it's a lot, and we just, it's more and more compounded, like each year, each unfunded mandate, everything that we do there's so much that we need to do.
Agreed.
You made a comment on the correlation between suspension rates and dropout rates. Have we seen a decrease in dropout rates with this great work?
It's
Might
hard
be
to
too
say.
soon
The
to
dropout,
appreciate the impact.
yeah, the dropout rate kind of fluctuates every year because it's a singular cohort. We usually are somewhere between 97% to 99% in the 5-year cohort, which is the one I place the most value on, because sometimes it takes people longer time to get the diploma, but as long as they get it, that's what we're focused on. So there might be some breaks along the way, not necessarily due to suspension, but maybe due to absenteeism or failing classes, where over time they mature a little bit. We work with them this summer, we work with them with extra classes at night and get them caught up and out the door with the goal. So
I would ask Josh, what I'm about to say is true. Students with disabilities tend to be suspended at a higher rate, I think, across the board. And if you're a student who struggles to begin with, and then we suspend you for 3 to 5 days, and then we throw you back in a classroom where you don't know what's happening, and you've missed 3 to 5 days, what does that do to your behavior? It's easier to behave poorly and sometimes act out, because that's going to be the reason you're not getting the work done. It's not that you don't understand that you missed it. So I think we're not doing ourselves any favors in a lot of cases, but again, there are a number of cases which it's warranted.
I just have a question on the slide for focus area 4 about the suspension. So I wondered if the number, we were talking about the student population, I wondered if any of the number of students in either of the subgroups has changed, because when you're dealing with a smaller subgroup, then a very small like fluctuation in population is going to make a massive effect, so I just wondered.
Yeah, I don't know if I don't have those numbers in front of me, but yes, right? If we're talking about 100 students in versus 35, any instance of suspension is going to cause a spike, right? So I don't know the specifics of numbers of these students in each year, but we can come back with that or get that to John just so you have that as a reference point.
I have some of the numbers that John submitted to us. So in 21-22, 40% of Black or African American students were suspended, 33.3% of Hispanic and Latino students, and 25.9% of students with disabilities. In 24-25, one Black or African American student and 6 students with disabilities. There was a significant drop. I think the highlight, and yes, we're happy with the results we've seen, but those things that we put into place impacted everything. So it dropped across the board, which is really
I'd like to say thank you very much.
Oh, funny, the bottom light is going out, the top light is.
Can you hear me now? I want to thank you for the work that you've done. DESE comes down on districts with accountability system that feels like shame, blame, and punish. It's all about the numbers and the academics. It's not about the social, emotional, and spiritual growth of kids. And everything you're doing seems to address those issues. And I'm thinking back when we had a different report that grade by grade showed the growth of students, and the growth in each grade was an upward tradition. And it's amazing to me that at the same time, the decline in suspensions. So you have done something good. It's obviously working. You're making connections with kids so they feel comfortable. They've got an adult in the building that they feel safe in bringing their issues to. And when the student is comfortable, they're going to perform better. You know, back in my day, I used to say to the kids, hey, everybody's got a right to an education. Don't have a right to behave in a way that hurt somebody else's education. But those are conversations that can happen in the hallways, on the side, or whatever. Those human connections. I think you're doing a good job with that. And the fact that academic performance is on the uprise while suspension is on the downrise system, you're doing something right.
it's the teachers and the staff,
Yeah.
and it really helps when it's fully funded.
I think one of the most important things you said tonight is that it's important to catch people when they're doing things right. And because you're both humble, you appropriately recognize your staff and your faculty, but I want to make sure you're recognized tonight. I hope this feels like a moment when you're being recognized for some of the good things you're doing. I know the work that went into making those charts go the way that they went. It's a total reculturing, and that's hard. That's about changing hearts and minds, right, across the board. And it was not a one-time thing. It was a constant effort over months and years. And it's shown really good results. And I'm proud of you, and I hope you're proud of yourself. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I want to echo what the last thing I heard is that things need to be funded. You're funding things on grants go away. That should be part of the funding that comes from the state. If they want to point the finger at schools and say, you got to deal with discipline, give us the resources. Not in a temporary grant, in the money that comes in on a regular basis. And I hope anybody who's listening calls Representative Pupolo. They're talking about it right now. He needs to step up and bring communities like ours the resources we need.
Yeah, I don't want to get you fired up, Tim, but, you know, we all know that the budget for next year isn't representative of what we need, right? Class sizes are gonna be larger. You know, services will be tighter. Like, all of that is gonna impact this good work, because everything that good that happens in our district starts with the relationship between a teacher and a kid. And we need to find ways to make that easier to happen, not harder. We'll go to the next agenda.
Thank you.
So going to the next agenda item, there are some through lines here. We had our first call with the district review team this week. It's our first glimpse of what the final report that we'll receive between probably June and August will likely show. So I just wanted to share some of that information with you. If you could go to the slide that says class domains overview. These were, what they were reporting to us were results of the classroom observations that took place. They observed about 50 classrooms across all schools in the district in the week they were here. And just to orient you to the numbers a little bit, the class domains all run from a range of 1 to 7. So scores of 6 and 7 are considered to be in the high range. Scores of 1 and 2 are considered to be in the low range, and everything in between is in the middle. As you can see, emotional support and classroom organization came out to be very high for us. Those are essentially some of the areas that Principals DeRosa and Hale were just talking about, in addition to what you might call classroom management. So everywhere they went across the district, observing classrooms, observers saw a high level of emotional support being provided for students by the teachers, and they saw a high level of organization, productivity, classroom management, very low levels of any disruption or negative behavior. One of the sub-scales on this, you get into the full report, which is like 60 pages long, is something they call negative environment, which is basically misbehaving. The score on that is 6.9 out of 7, which is about as good as it gets. Not saying kids never misbehave, but saying that the classroom management techniques were very strong, and that the observers were really impressed by the behavior they saw of our students in classrooms, which again, I think speaks to all the work that's done with culture. Part of the reason why there can be less suspensions is because there's less behavior. All the things you do in order to support kids so they don't act out, so that you don't have to suspend, was evident in the observations. So they called out 2, or maybe 3, for just a little bit of discussion. The first one was productivity, which was one of the highest rated indicators, like not the absolute highest, but across the board, one of the highest things. This is an indicator that looks at how much time students are actually doing productive work, learning in the classrooms where the observations took place. And you can see basically across the board, it was from middle to high range. So teachers and students are using the time they have to learn very effectively across the board. The next one we talked a little bit about is instructional dialogue. This one talks about the level of student discourse. So this one gets into, you know, the depth of conversation between students and teachers, and, you know, how much students really are having opportunity to express and build on their ideas and thoughts. This one was a little bit lower, so this is an area where we may look to try to make some improvements as we look at our next strategic plan. It was still in the middle range. I should mention this, nothing in any of the dimensions fell into the low range, but this is an area where we are maybe on a growth path. The next one we talked about was analysis and inquiry. This is one that looks at the extent to which students were doing deep analysis of problems where they were given an opportunity to really explore and pull apart ideas and work with problems in novel contexts, maybe where they hadn't seen an example of how to work a problem, but were challenged with something completely new and asked, how would you solve this? And this was an area where we fell to the lower end of the moderate range. They did say that across everywhere they do this, this is one of the areas where they see the most room for growth. So this may be an area that we look to in the future. So there are many dimensions. These are just a few that they pulled out. So there were a few that we talked about. Just wanted to share those with you. There'll be much more to come when we get our full report. They also talked about some preliminary themes. One was that the district commitment to implementing building thinking classrooms was evident. Regardless of the school they went to, regardless of the grade level or the teacher, they saw building thinking classroom practices in place. So it was evident to them that we had invested heavily in this model of teaching, and that teachers were invested in it as well, and that it was strongly implemented throughout the district. Next was student support. And in this, they really called out the work we've been doing on chronic absenteeism. One of the things that they lauded us for in our feedback is that just looking at our data, in the aggregate, and in every single student subgroup, our chronic absenteeism rate is about half the statewide average. So they asked a lot about our process and the work we do. It came up in the equity walk for those of you who were there. It is sometimes difficult conversations between principals and families. And I, again, appreciate that work. It's having an impact. And when you look at the correlation between attendance and achievement, it's one of the strongest correlations I've seen in education. So I think that is a strong indicator of our success and a strong driver of our success. The next thing they talked about, which will be no surprise to anyone, there are some complications with the current regional agreement, and a real need to clean that up. The mismatch between what the agreement says and what's actually happening has created some tension between the towns, and it is really sort of manifested in the middle school in particular. I expressed at the last planning committee meeting, some of my own personal feelings of disappointment that we haven't been able to fix this problem yet. We have one more year on the current strategic plan before we have to write the next one. I am sure we'll have this as a finding of the district review. I'm hoping we can get this cleaned up in the next year so that we don't have to put it in the next strategic plan as well. So for next steps, over the next few months, they will continue to further refine and dive into their findings. They'll continue to triangulate the data they collected through a number of different ways. There'll be more report writing and editing. There'll be another call similar to the one that we just had to discuss findings at a more in-depth level. And then we will receive a report that we can review for any sort of factual errors. We'll send that back to them, and then we will get our final report. As I've said many times, that will kick off a process of deep reflection on what was included in the report that will set the stage for writing our next strategic plan over the course of the next year, so that as our current strategic plan expires, we'll be ready to go with a new plan that's grounded not only in documentary evidence, but grounded in, as you see, a lot of classroom observations from across the district. So the last thing, I'm sorry my report is so long tonight, but the last thing I just wanted to talk about is the implementation of RIF notices. I also regret to end on a low note, but as we had discussed at the last meeting, that process began this week. was implemented over the course of yesterday and today. Very difficult conversations, because we were going from the process of talking about trying to make a budget balance and trying to meet the constraints that different funders had shared with us and what the actual impacts are going to be on our employees. Talking about employees who, are doing a wonderful job, employees making possible the kinds of things that the principals reported on tonight, and us basically saying, we don't know if we can afford for you to be here next year. So we're giving you this notice. Very hard. Some people, relying on that income to support their family. So all I will say is, I'm personally not giving up the fight. As you know, we had to provide the notice this week by contract, but the budget process isn't over. I think the next important part of the process is the report of the Hampden Advisory Committee, which is 7 o'clock next week in Hampden Town Hall. I plan to be there. Encourage, 6:30, Hampden Town Hall. Thank you for that. Plan to be there. Encourage anyone who is concerned about the process to be there, because it is critically important that the school committee's budget get the support of the towns, because it would be beyond devastating to try to run the district with the number of notices that we had to give out in the last 2 days. I'm sorry, 7 o'clock, it is 7 o'clock. That's my report.
And that's on Tuesday, right?
That's Tuesday. Yep.
Any questions for John? Okay, so we will continue with new business. So we have the Wilbraham Middle School field trip to Sunny's Place in Summers. So John here to share the details.
We would like to go to Sunny's Place in Enfield, Connecticut, or Summers, Connecticut. Please. Our 6th grade goes every year, and I don't know if there's a mechanism to approve it once for multiple years, or if that's not what the policy says, but that would be wonderful.
Motion to approve the proposed field trip to Sunny's Place.
Questions or discussion? Okay, so we'll do roll call. Cheryl?
Aye.
Tim?
Yes.
Lisa? Yes. Mike?
Yes.
Sean?
Aye.
Myself, yes. Motion passes. Thank you. And then we have the request for a new club at Minnechaug for badminton.
Yeah, we would like to have a badminton club. I don't know if there's any questions.
I actually do have a question.
Yeah.
Is this the process for starting a club? Is the club, has this already been meeting? Has this club already been meeting?
This club is in the process of being approved, and what happens with that is that it starts with the kids.
Yep.
The kids get together and they're like, we want to do a club. Then they get an advisor. There has to be a faculty advisor. It doesn't have to be someone that has the same interest, but is saying, yeah, you can use my room after school to meet, and I'll be here to make sure everybody's safe, but you do what you need to do, and if you need me to advocate for something that you need. Usually when it gets to this point, and they may have started to play a little badminton, when it gets to this point, they want an account to incur costs. So it might be to buy a badminton set for outside, so they can play outside, that kind of thing.
Is this going to be like a stipended?
Not at this time.
Position?
They have
Okay.
to go through a certain number of years
Okay.
before it would be proposed to be added to Appendix B.
Okay.
That's not where we're at right now. This is just a recognition of the club and the possible ability to go out and buy things for the club that student activities would provide the money for, or they might fundraise on their own.
Okay. Thank you.
Motion to approve the badminton club.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Okay, roll call. Cheryl?
Aye.
Tim?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Sean?
Aye.
Myself, aye. Motion carries. Thank you. So we will continue with the Assistant Superintendent for Finance Operations and Human Resources. Doug?
So the item I have for you this evening is the MSBA update. What I have with me here tonight, just a section of the MSBA core statement of interest, core program statement of interest. It's a series of questions that they asked. And this was just one of the questions that they asked a whole variety of questions about the details that support why we picked the priorities that we picked last time, which was priority 2, priority 4, priority 5, and priority 7. 2 is current overcrowding, 4 is future overcrowding, 5 is about systems, essentially reaching end of life, and 7 is about, the need to potentially replace systems for the purposes of mitigating overcrowding, but also just because they're end of life. It's kind of a combination of those things. But in the initial sort of pieces of the statement of interest, one of the questions that it asks is in bold here at the top of this piece of paper, which is, please provide a description of the local actions and approvals needed to secure both funding for a feasibility study and project funding for a potential building project with the MSBA. Please include schedule information for both funding actions, i.e. town meeting, town council, town meetings, regional school committee meetings, etc. Of course, there's a maximum of 2,000 characters, so you can't get too into the weeds of the details here. But what we've tried to capture is sort of the state of circumstances we're in at the moment. Part of the reason I think the MSBA asks this question is to make sure that people like me, that are administrators, understand the sort of political context and the actual mechanics of funding something. But it's also an opportunity, like in this case, where we can speak to the changes that we're currently in process of, and the conversations we've had with our select boards about the process and what we, what and how we might move forward relative to this particular project. So, what I've shared here is a bit of the mechanics that we go through. I mean, some of it in the second paragraph is much more just sort of the nuts and bolts of it, but it is taking a view of consideration of both towns being part of that funding process for a project of this size. So I wanted you guys to read this over and perhaps give us your thoughts about this. The other thing I'll say more generally about the statement of interest is it is due tomorrow. We have a few things left to refine as far as our narrative that we put together. I have done it. I gave it to the superintendent. He looked it over. He had a few comments. We're going to polish those up. There are a series of electronic signatures that have to go with it for the superintendent and for the chair. So I will check with you later about what your schedule's like tomorrow, so that you have awareness of when we might need signatures from you electronically.
So, just glancing at the second paragraph, this does not match at all the plan for funding the feasibility study that we discussed with those select boards. When we met with the select boards, the proposal was made that the school committee would move likely to borrow the money for the feasibility study. And both select boards seemed on board with that plan. So this is a difference than that. Although I'm not sure if both select boards will allow the school committee to do that without it going to a town meeting, which is their prerogative. But
so I would say this in regard to sort of how I phrase this, is that, because we're speaking, part of it is answering the question is how you would fund both parts. And so some of it's about the mechanics. The thing is that for either the feasibility study or the actual project itself, it's likely that borrowing will have to occur. And for that to happen, the school district would be the one that would have to incur that, which is the school committee responsibility to authorize that. It then goes to the towns for their approval or disapproval. Technically, if they don't take any action, they approve tacitly. But this is something of a size of resource that they're going to commit that we would want them to be actively choosing and putting it on the ballot. So it's a circumstance where a bit of the semantics of this, whether the regional district does the borrowing or not, is still starting with the school committee and approval of debt that you would do and assess to each of the two towns, but is taking the view of the project being a cooperative one between the two towns as far as ultimately paying for it. So I'm hoping that that's clear in some ways,
So
but
that first sentence you have there is, you feel you're indicating that the school committee will vote to borrow the money?
absolutely.
Okay, because it doesn't say, it just says recommended by a vote. Funding would be recommended by a vote.
Right, which would be whatever mechanism, whether we borrow or don't borrow.
We could have it in our savings account, but
Right. I
we all
mean,
know
you
we
could,
don't.
It could be as simple as that. So if it were such that you had resources on hand,
I see.
you could vote that as part of a budget, as long as it's, those still need to be approved as part of the budgetary process, which still involves all those other committees, et cetera, et cetera. So even if you're using a resource you have, or you're recommending a borrowing, you're still going to take the first active step to say this is what we're doing, and then the towns have their responsibilities as far as approval and appropriation.
Can I just say, this is exactly why I asked Doug to bring this one question out of like a 25-page document to us tonight. This has to go to the state tomorrow, and I'm somewhat concerned, and also wondering strategically and wondering about guidance for how this type of language, which is now public, could be shared and circulated to make sure there are no misunderstandings later on.
Circulated
To the towns.
We don't have time to open dialogue with the towns on this, right? And we could share the information, but, they would, the soonest that the select boards could discuss it would be on Monday. If they chose to immediately post to discuss it, that would be too late.
Right. I wasn't thinking about sharing it before we submit. I was thinking about sharing it because this also impacts another conversation that is trying to be arranged between the towns potentially. And like, what are the best means to do that? Specifically talking about the conversation about the regional agreement.
Well, I don't think that in the first paragraph, at least, I don't know, everybody should voice in, but I don't think in the first paragraph you're misrepresenting. I've heard statements from both select boards at various times that they both recognize that if there was a major regional project done for the middle school, whether it was an addition, reconstruction, or the construction of a new building, that it would be a regional project. And everyone seems to understand if it was an addition, remodeling, that the ownership of the middle school would need to change to the school district. Though the exact terms of that haven't been negotiated.
Which is why I didn't hint at that whatsoever. The devil is in the details, and
Right.
it is intentionally not here, because I think it is fair to say those conversations are ongoing and need to continue.
I mean, it's a difficult financial time for the communities to be looking at the construction of a new building, but it's, at least knowing what I know about the middle school building, it's also difficult for me to foresee that the building is going to be considered salvageable by the state. But we don't know the answer to those questions, right? So, but I don't know. I like how it's worded. This is a bigger Hampton issue, I think, than a Wilbraham issue, really.
So you're just looking to share this?
I'm looking if you have any thoughts, like if you think it should be shared from the chair to the chairs of the select boards, or if it should be chaired from me to the town administrators, or if it be shared from legal counsel to the other attorneys, or, what the best process is that might, not, avoid any pitfalls.
I think once we have something that we've submitted, we share it with everybody.
Yes. Yes, but not through the lawyers.
Okay.
So, in case you were curious, here's a copy of the, application to the core building program that we submitted, and let us know if you have any questions.
Okay.
Not asking for, analysis and thoughts. You're exactly right, Tim, right? Because if we send this and say, tell us your thoughts, right, then we're going to have a meeting, we're going to discuss, and then it's going to be 3 years of planning committee meetings.
Well, and it's due tomorrow, so.
And it's due tomorrow, so, and not submitting, I am confident that both select boards would be very disappointed if this application did not get submitted. Because they seem to both be enthusiastically supporting that we seek help on the core building program for the new school.
But we are in a bit of a pickle here, aren't we? Where I don't think that if the state says we'll pay for half and we want to renovate the present middle school building in Wilbraham, I don't know if Hampton is, if they've decided what they want to do about that. Because they haven't decided about what they want to do about the things that should have been fixed, or they believe should have been fixed before, right? So I think that we should go ahead with what we believe as a committee. And I think what it's going to come down to is maybe a new building on the Minnechaug campus. We do have the land for it. At the last planning meeting, Hampton did say that they had, I thought Doug said something like 35 acres there, that something could be built on. So I think options, as long as we bring all those options when they're doing the assessment to figure out if this is a project that the MSBA wants to work on, then, and the politics of both towns plays into it. But we can't keep, the middle school students in a building like this. This is not helping their education. We all know the pitfalls of it. And I do want to say that John DeRosa and the admin team, the teachers and the paras, are really doing Herculean work to make it so that the students don't necessarily feel the impact of all of these negative traits from the building. But yeah, I think we just have to, as a committee, we know we need a new building or we need the old building renovated. But I think due to the politics of the town, we have to focus on a new building. And I know that, in these economic times, for us to say, hey, we're building a new building, won't be popular. But I'm not sure what other options we have.
So the discussion is just regarding the MSBA update. We have already decided that we are going to submit our application, which is due tomorrow. So I think everyone is on board with that. Both towns have already agreed to meet and move forward with their discussions. And they will update us as to where they stand on that. And it's for us to discuss where and if a new school or renovation will occur and whether or not we're accepted to the MSBA. I think that is not a conversation that we should be having at this time. It's not our decision where a building would be placed. We don't know. We haven't even submitted the application at this time. So I think we're just getting ahead of ourselves. So Doug will be submitting the application tomorrow. This document that you had just shared will be shared between the two communities, and we'll see what happens.
The whole application, right? You just share a copy of the whole application with the relevant people in both communities after it's been submitted. Like on Monday.
There'll be plenty of opportunities for discussion, but we have the first step. We're taking the first step, which is submitting the application.
But
There'll
you're
be
exactly
plenty of
right,
things to
Michelle.
work on.
I mean, there's no point in borrowing trouble from tomorrow. We don't, we may not be invited in. It's a new discussion at that point.
But still, it's a discussion respectfully that I think we should have, because we didn't have it when we said we wanted to renovate, the windows and stuff like that, and we got the money, or we got approval from the MSBA, and then we had to say no to it. I really do think that we need to have at least a couple of conversations about what we're having down the road, so the community can really grasp the magnitude of what this actually means.
I do believe there will be plenty of opportunity, and we'll have plenty of discussion. And I think that knowing more after both towns meet, I think that will also be helpful, because there are so many moving parts. So there will be many discussions. The public will be informed. I'm sure, this is not the last time we're going to be talking about it. But we do know for a fact that Doug will be submitting the application tomorrow. So good luck. So it is now time for public comment. Oh, I'm sorry.
and sharing it with all interested parties from both towns.
Correct, yes. Time for public comment. So if you've signed up, Alyssa, if you're interested, if you wouldn't mind sitting at the end of the table, and if you could just please state your name and your affiliation with the district, and just press the button once you see the green light, we'll all be able to hear you.
Hi, my name is Alyssa Bermucci. I live in Hampton. I am a mother of 4. I currently have one son going to the middle school, which terrifies me with all the things that have been going on. I have one daughter in kindergarten in Green Meadows. I have another going in next year. These proposed cuts would make it so my daughter going in next year would mean a class of approximately 37 children, because it would get rid of the kindergarten teacher. Can you imagine one teacher with 37 5- and 6-year-olds? That's wild. And I confirmed with the school. There is currently one class of 18 kids, one class of 19, and they are projected with enrollment to reach that number, if not go over for next year. I am begging you guys to find a way, because right now it does not feel equitable between Hamden and Wilbraham and these class sizes and what's happening. And we feel like the redheaded stepchildren. So please, please, find a different way. Cut something that we could bring back. But do not let us lose another kindergarten teacher. For no fault of her own. You know, the only reason she's only been there a year is because the other one retired last year. She's an amazing teacher. She has done wonders with my daughter. Please do not lose her. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Gabrielle?
Thank you.
Hi, I am Gabrielle Fisk. I have a first grader in Hampton at Green Meadows and a rising pre-K student who hopefully there's a full day program this year will be in school as well. Then he'll be a kindergartner in a 40-kid classroom the following year, so great. I am here because I'd like to, one, ask a question I realize you're not required to answer, but I do want to pose it on record to determine, you know, if contracts, one, are these budget cuts based on updated contract approval and agreement across district and teachers? And if not, should we expect additional cuts when and if those contracts ever get agreed upon at this point? So I don't, are you prepared to answer that?
Yeah, the school committee doesn't, but I can respond.
Great.
So I want to be clear, and I think this also goes to the first comment. The positions that you're talking about, first-year teachers, are in the school committee's budget. The school committee passed a budget that includes those teachers. The reason that those notices were given is because it's unclear whether the towns will pass the budget.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I said it's important to show up at the meeting next Tuesday, and it's going to be very important to show up at the town meeting and vote to support the school budget. So that's, so to your direct question about contracts, not related to contracts at all.
Okay, so let's assume it gets passed, right? Great. When it does come time for contract negotiations to actually formally be approved and agreed upon, should we expect additional changes to budget and additional cuts to account for changes in contract agreement?
Well, I don't want to get into confidential contracts, but I'm going to say that my answer stands. The positions are in the school committee's budget. The only reason that the notices were given is because there's uncertainty about whether or not the budget will pass at the town meetings.
And one other point, and I know I'm out of time, but just being mindful, I believe the proposed change with the reduction in force is to take a high school gym teacher, assuming they're certified to teach younger age children, to the elementary school of Green Meadows. Is that correct?
That's a personal matter. I can't get into that.
Okay. Well, I'm being told by people that's correct. So assume that's the case, right? Where in this land of complete massive amounts of time do we have the ability to add a additional time for a singular physical education teacher to support 2 different schools, 2 different age groups students with already decreased prep time, decreased support time, and decreased curriculum enhancement time at the school that we currently support? I realize you don't have an answer, but I just want to point out in record that we're proposing theoretical solutions that are not, that create additional problems. And I think it's important to be mindful of that, and that it comes on the backs of our kids and their academic success. And when you talk about, to your point, having close to 40 kids in a kindergarten class, the great work that our middle school and high school principals have done, that you yourself acknowledge was so wonderful in building culture and bridging gap and creating connectivity and students being seen, is immediately eliminated when you require students to be in environments where there is physical impossibility of them being seen. So I just want to make that noted. And I appreciate the ability to comment on it, but just know, I will Aaron Brockovich the crap out of that meeting next week. And there's a massive responsibility on you all to advocate for our students, as the parents, as the educators, as community members, and to not be beholden to anything else. Thank you.
Thank you. Is anyone else interested in making another comment or public comment at all? Okay. Yes, but they stated that they would not be speaking. Okay. All right, so we will continue with the subcommittee updates. Curriculum subcommittee, Lisa?
No update.
Planning committee, no update at this time. Finance, operations, technology subcommittee, Mike?
We have not had a meeting, and we have passed the budget. So I think the next potential anticipated meeting will probably be scheduled ad hoc if the towns don't pass the budget, and we have to come up with a new recommendation for the school committee.
Okay.
So you said that the towns might not pass the budget.
We are particularly concerned that Camden won't pass the budget. Wilbraham FinCom is currently recommending supporting the school committee's proposed budget. But we have not heard from Hampton Advisory whether they're going to recommend supporting the full budget that the school committee has proposed. It's just the way the numbers work this year. There's an increase in the number, in the percent of students from Hampden, along with a number of other financial considerations in the town of Hampden. So, I mean, Hampden is in very serious financial condition this year. They're no matter what they do, they're going to be dipping very deep into excess capacity, which is going to leave them in an even more vulnerable position next year. I don't envy the position of the Hampden Advisory or the Hampden Select Board, because they know the tradition in the town is to really struggle with being able to get an override passed, and I think that they're worried. They're trying to balance to keep enough excess capacity so that they're not in an override situation for next year. It's just really hard. Now, if the percent of students, if we get an increase in the percent of students in Wilbraham for the budget next year might be a much easier year for Wilbraham, for Hampden, but we don't know how that's going to be. I really, really, really wish for financial stability in both towns that they could get themselves together and get the amendment to the regional agreement put through and passed, because part of that is, instead of every year the changes in student population coming into full force, okay, to impact the budgets, it'll be a 3-year average if both towns agree each year to have that happen. So like, if we have that in place, there wouldn't have been as dramatic an increase in Hampden's responsibility for the budget this year, which was a big driver for the cuts that had to be made. Now, Wilbraham would have been paying a little bit more, right? But that kind of thing helps everyone in both directions, right? Because it was just 2.5 years ago, Wilbraham was choking on the budget because the percent of students in Wilbraham had gone up. So that kind of funding adjustment, where it averages over the 3 years, dampens the change on the towns, because both towns are restricted by Proposition 2.5, which limits in any given year how much funds can be increased by tax increases, unless there's an override that's passed. So I was really hoping that we were going to be able to get an amendment to the regional agreement going to the town meetings for approval this year, but it looks like the towns haven't been able to come together on that yet. So, but it is on the warrant article, so there's always hope.
I'm so glad you went through the whole thing, because every meeting, we talk a little bit about each piece. Thank you for putting it all together.
Lisa, do you have anything for the LPVET collaborative?
No, there was a meeting yesterday, but I could not attend because I was doing parent-teacher conferences at my own school last night.
Okay. Nothing for negotiations. I have nothing to report at this time. Policy Subcommittee, Mike.
We have a meeting in the last week of April, and we're very excited about it.
April 29th.
April 29th at 5 o'clock.
Okay. So anything for the LPVET Corporation?
Nope.
Okay, and there's nothing to report on the superintendent evaluation. We will move to the consent agenda.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call. Cheryl?
Aye.
Tim?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Mike?
Yeah.
Sean?
Aye.
Myself, aye. Motion carries. And we do also have donations.
Oh, yeah, we do.
Make a motion to accept the donations.
Second.
Okay, so we have a donation of, one is $3,400 from the Falcons Athletic Booster to the Minnechaug Regional High School Athletics. The other donation is $1,000 from the Community Foundation of Western Massachusetts to the Richard J. Moriarty Information Center at Green Meadows School. Questions or discussion?
Heartfelt thank you to the community and the boosters, and once again, help out the schools.
And we're going to send, thank you notes out to them, correct?
Always do.
Yep.
Thank you.
So we'll do roll call on that motion. Cheryl?
Aye.
Tim?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Sean?
Aye.
Myself, aye. Motion carries. So now we have some future agenda items. We have still the school road car loop, as well as traffic lines at all the other schools that we discussed. Our next meeting is May 6th, Wednesday, May 6th at 6:30 here in the IRC. We do have the need for executive session pursuant to Master Law, C, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares. Landers, Fortunato, v. HWRSD. Units A and C contracts, 16 for organ donation. Master Law, C30A, Section 21A, 7, to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law, specifically Master Law on Chapter 214, Section 1B, Massachusetts Students' Records Law, Master Law, Chapter 71, Section 34D, Massachusetts Student Records Regulation 603, CMR 23, and Sequentia, and Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, FERPA, 20 U.S.C. Section 132G, and 34 CFR for 99, regarding student transfer requests.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so we will do roll call to move out of general session and into executive session. We will not be returning to regular session, and we will be adjourning from executive. So we will do roll call. Cheryl? Tim?
Yes.
Lisa?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Sean?
Aye.
Myself, aye. We're now moved to executive session. It is 7:50 p.m.